Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another Marvel Snap video. So after the most recent update, the developers pushed Killmonger and Sandman much earlier into Pool 3, so the availability of that card has grown drastically. So I wanted to go back and rebuild and refine our previous Sandman deck list, and what I ended up with was something that feels phenomenal. So the first time we built a Sandman deck, it felt okay when you could draw into your Sandman, but if you didn't, it felt like you were very much at a disadvantage. So we took an entirely different approach with building our Sandman deck this time around. The two key cards in this deck are going to be Psylocke and Sandman. So Psylocke is going to act as a ramp tool to give us additional energy to push out Sandman on turn 3 instead of turn 4. And then of course Sandman, ongoing, players can only play one card at a time. The rest of the deck list is really just designed to push out either early or late game power, or cause a lot of late game disruption so that we can adjust where the enemy's power is going to be at all times during those last few turns. And so most notably, last time we had a lot of 3-cost cards, but that doesn't synergize well with us wanting to ramp up into Sandman on turn 3. So if we draw into our ideal combo, we don't really need any 3-cost cards because our turn 3 play would be Sandman. Then after that, we can only drop one card a turn anyways. So running through the cards really quickly. First up, we have Sunspot. Sunspot is a cheap 1-cost card that's going to buff up over time. He works especially well with Sandman in that you're probably not going to spend all of your mana every single turn, and so he has plenty of room to grow and get stronger. Next up, we have the new buffed up Ebony Maw. So Ebony Maw is a 1-cost 7-power card, but he has the drawback that you can't play this after turn 3, and the ongoing ability you can't play cards here. And so ideally we want to drop this maybe on turn 2 or 3 if we don't draw into our Psylocke, knowing that we can push additional power in that lane through Dr. Doom or through Leader, or pull power out of that lane from the opponent with cards like Arrow or Magneto. Then we have Lockjaw. Lockjaw is our only 3-cost card in this deck, and he's here in case we don't draw into our Psylocke, in case we don't draw into our Sandman. We're going to be able to drop Lockjaw on turn 3, try to flip into either Sandman on turn 4 or one of our high power 6-cost cards to start giving us a power advantage over our opponent. And as always with Lockjaw, you want to make sure that any card that you could flip into is not going to be an absolute negative for that lane. So Lockjaw would be especially bad with cards like Carnage or Deathlock or something that's going to destroy your lane. The only potential drawback here is going to be the Ebony Maw. And if we flip into Ebony Maw, it's not the end of the world. We can still distribute power through Dr. Doom and Leader, and it would allow us to cheat Ebony Maw out after turn 3. Next up we have Jubilee. Jubilee is going to act to pull a random card from our deck, and is especially good with Sandman. So let's say we drop Sandman on 3 and we have the location Mojo World on the board. We want to be able to place more cards in that lane than the opponent, and the only way to do that if we're limited to 1 card a turn is to drop something like a Jubilee or a Dr. Doom or a Leader where we're going to be able to cheat additional cards into the lane. And then we have Crossbones. Crossbones is going to be a secondary target for our turn 3 or even turn 4 drop if we don't have Sandman. So if we don't have Sandman, ideally we will have dropped either Sunspot or Psylocke, and then we have the lead in one of the lanes, and we can follow up with Crossbones to extend that lead quite a bit. And then we have Claw. So Claw functions very well in this deck in that he's going to be able to impact more than one lane. So let's say they drop a Professor X in the mid lane, you can drop Claw on the left-hand side to push additional power into that lane while still getting power in the left lane. And with only being able to drop 1 card a turn, Claw can really swing some games when the opponent's least expecting it. Next up we have Arrow. Arrow on reveal, move all enemy cards played this turn. This is a wonderful disruption tool. We can use this to guarantee where the opponent's cards are going to go, allowing us to set up a very easy, very consistent turn 6 play that's going to put us at an advantage. And then we have Leader. So Leader is going to allow us to cheat an additional card onto the board. So with Sandman, we're only able to play 1 card a turn. With Leader, we're going to be able to play a 4-power card, and then we're also going to be able to copy whatever the opponent plays to give ourselves some additional upside. And then we have our newly drawn Dr. Doom. So Dr. Doom is going to be a really good card in this deck list in that he's able to impact more than one lane. And that is the idea behind this deck list, is to be able to impact more than one lane while the opponent's only able to impact 1. And then lastly, we have Magneto. Magneto is a great disruption tool, and he's a high power 6-cost card as well. So you can drop Magneto, and let's say they use Storm to lock down a lane. You can use Magneto that's going to pull out any of their 3 and 4 cost cards into the location that you drop him in. And we can make sure that this is pretty consistent, and we're able to pull the maximum number of cards pretty consistently with our use of Sandman in this deck. Alright, so that is the rundown of this deck. We're going to go ahead and jump into some games. So first up we have ABBB 1, 2, 3, 4. We draw into our Psylocke, so we're going to be able to ramp on turn 2. Technically we could on turn 1 if we wanted to, but it doesn't give us any kind of upside. And we could drop Ebony Maw, but it's too early to know if that's going to be advantageous for us or not. So if we can ramp into our Sandman, it would have ended up being advantageous to drop Ebony Maw, let's say in the mid lane. But without knowing exactly what we're going to draw into, we're going to go ahead and pass. And so they drop in a Koye, which is a 2-cost card now, but since we had Tinker's Workshop, they were able to drop it on turn 1. And then the hub gives us the Cloak, which I think is an okay card. I'm still going to go with the Psylocke ramp here and just hope that we draw into either Crossbones or Jubilee or Sandman on turn 3. And so we draw into Lockjaw here. And so I think what we do is we start flipping in Camartage. We're going to use Ebony Maw as a way to have a cheap flip. And then if we draw into something like Leader, we're going to create 2 copies of whatever card ABBB drops. And then if we flip into Sandman, that's perfect. From there, we can kind of start playing to our advantage and generating value upside where we can. So let's go ahead and lock into the flip here. We know that Ebony Maw is really the only potential downside or negative card that we could draw into. And so I think we have a pretty good chance of having a decent flip here. And so we flip Ebony Maw back in. I eat my words. So I eat my words. That is probably the second worst flip that we could draw into. And the animation for Ebony Maw still goes off, even though he is flipped in. So some weird kinks or quirks with Lockjaw, but nothing that can't be worked out. We can still actually play cards in that location. So I'm going to drop Crossbones into the hub since we do have a 1 power lead to be able to extend that by just a little bit. And then depending on what we draw here, we draw into Sandman, but part of me says it's a little bit too little too late to make good use out of him. So I think what we do instead is we drop Claw into Tinker's Workshop. Next turn, we're either going to be able to use Magneto to pull cards to wherever we want to pull them, or we could flip 2 cards with a Cloak and a Sandman to try and pull our Leader or a Dr. Doom, which is going to really distribute a lot of power onto the board. So we're going to go ahead and lock into Claw here. That's going to give us some kind of flexibility in where all of our power is. Ooh, and they drop Sarah. So that is going to be pretty scary because they do have the double Nakia buff. That's very, very scary. But we do have the upside here. I think because we can do the double Leader drop here and still potentially flip into something like Dr. Doom, or we could flip into Jubilee or Ebony Maw, which would be a decent flip. I think we go with Leader. That's going to duplicate whatever they drop, which I anticipate them flooding the board probably here and here. But if we can duplicate what they drop here and get the upside, we may be able to sneak out a win here. I think this is our best shot at making that happen. So Leader was probably the perfect top deck that we could have gotten, knowing that they're going to flood the board with some really buffed up cards. So let's lock that in and kind of see the madness unfold. They had a Galactus that they got from the hub, and then a Yellow Jacket, and then Star-Lord. And so they only dropped 3 cards here. So that's interesting. So we do copy 2 of their higher cost cards, and then we draw into our Dr. Doom, which is going to do a double on reveal Doombot drop to swing us the left lane. Us copying the cards was able to swing us the mid lane, and so we're able to hold out the game. I feel like everything in that play line worked out perfectly. Dropping the Claw into Tinker's Workshop was what was able to give us just enough power into the hub to win that location, but I guess if we had dropped the Claw here, it would have pushed enough power to win Camartage. Very, very satisfying play line. The Leader flip into Dr. Doom was just... you couldn't ask for anything better. So next up we have Miruim, and we pull Patriot onto the board with Sakaar, and then Psylocke is what gets pulled onto the board for us. We know that unless they pass for the first 2 turns, they're not going to be able to use Mystique to copy this Patriot ability, and that gives us quite a bit of information on what kind of deck they're running here. And so we do have Psylocke, so we're going to get I think the on reveal buff this second turn, and so we'll have 3 power to play with. We're not able to push anything out, but at least we're going to be able to absorb that extra energy with our Sunspot. Not the most ideal, but at least we do get a little bit of upside. And they do end up not skipping until turn 3, so we know that they're not going to be able to Mystique the Patriot. And so then the hub generates Apocalypse, which is not great for us. We are going to be able to drop a Sandman this next turn if we want to, but I don't know that we do. So they have a lot of tokens. If we limit what they can play, that also limits what we can play. If we copy it with leader, we don't get a lot of great upside out of it. I think what we go with here instead is our Jubilee. I think we are going to forego Sandman. I think because we weren't able to play it on turn 3, it feels a little bit too late for us to drop it now. And so to kind of copy what they have on the board, I'm going to play my Claw into the mid lane. That's going to push some power into the hub. They're going to have to invest additional resources there to keep the win. Ooh, and they drop a Magic here. So that gives us an extra turn to kind of manipulate and play around with this build. And so I think because we know this is not the last turn, I want to play our Magneto into Limbo. That's going to pull their Patriot over. And so let's say they dropped an Onslaught this turn to duplicate the Patriot buff. We're going to be able to pull the Patriot out and kind of interrupt what they were wanting to do. Because I would anticipate maybe an Onslaught this turn and then a Mystique to copy the Onslaught on turn 7. But we would be able to pull Patriot out, and then that's going to make the Onslaught, if that's what this is, pretty much useless here. So we do get the good call there. And so knowing that we capped out this location in Limbo with our Magneto, we have enough power with Claw that it's going to be over what we need. What we can do here is we can play leader into Limbo, and they frowny faced our Magneto. So we can either drop Dr. Doom, or I think more notably we can drop leader. I'm a little bit torn though. So I don't know if I want to do Dr. Doom, which is going to push power here and here, or if we want to do leader, which will copy whatever they play. But we only have one space to copy in the Wakandan embassy. And so if we play it here, we only have one space. And so if they drop 2 there, it becomes an issue. I think that becomes tough. We are going to do our Dr. Doom because we have such a large lead here and we have a lead in Limbo. So we're going to drop our Dr. Doom. They did have the retreat later, so we were overthinking it a bit. But I think Dr. Doom was the better play in that scenario had they played it out until the end. Okay, so next up we have Frozen Fires. We do have Sandman in our starting hand, but we don't have our ramp tool. So we need to draw Psylocke here to be able to drop Sandman on 3. Okay. All right, so next up we have Sedge. And we finally drew into the dream. The dream was real, and then they retreated. I can't. What are the chances? We do draw into our Sandman here, but it's not going to do us a lot of good, at least until turn 4. So what's interesting about the Widow's Bite, though, is that it coming in on turn 3 is actually very, very advantageous for us. So what we can do is use it as a rotation tool, or a cycle tool, to be able to cycle cards into our deck on turn 3 for free. Of course, that puts Widow's Bite back into our deck, but then we can just use it as a free rotation tool later. We are going to play Lockjaw into Westview along with the Widow's Bite. That's going to start our rotation. If we can draw into Dr. Doom, perfect, we probably win. If we drop our Claw, perfect, we probably win. We have a pretty good advantage here. So we're going to go ahead and snap, not knowing what they're playing other than a Black Widow. But we do get a pretty good advantage out of being able to cycle that Widow's Bite on that same turn. So a dead turn or a dead draw turns into us still being able to pull additional cards out of our deck. And so then we flip into Psylocke, which is not a good feeling. And then they drop a Debris here, which is also not a good feeling, because they do get a duplicate of Debris. And so they're going to be able to drop Debris over and over. And if I was them, I would probably drop the next one into the Gila, knowing that we already have this lane capped out. The only upside that we have is that Sunspot's going to be able to gain power over time. And even though we're locked out here, he's still going to be able to grow and get stronger. And then because we flipped into our Lockjaw, we do have 5 energy, so we're able to play Claw this turn and let them know that we are going to have power in the Sanctum Sanctorum. So are they doing their Debris in the cloning vats again? No, they're doing a Green Goblin. Okay, that's not terrible. And we do get the Doombot, but I don't think we need it. So they're going to have a duplicate of Green Goblin here. So do we play a card this turn, knowing that they have Green Goblin to play? And if we played a card this turn, it would be Claw. Or do we wait, let them drop their Green Goblin here? Next turn, we can do Leader. No, because then they're going to be dropping cards in this lane. So that doesn't give us a good upside. And if we wait one turn to drop Claw, is it the end of the world? So they can't drop both Debris debris and green goblin here. So I think we're safe to skip this turn, let our sunspot buff up a little bit. And that one's a hobgoblin, which is even tougher. So that is rough. So now we have to think, what are they going to drop? Are they able to push power into Sanctum Sanctorum? Probably not. Are they going to be able to push 17 power into the Gila with this deck? Maybe they drop a Spider Woman. They can't drop a Hobgoblin to hurt us here. I guess a Killmonger would do the trick, but I think we pass again. I think we let them do whatever they want to do in cloning vats because it doesn't impact us. We let our sunspot buff up as large as we possibly can and then just intentionally lose the cloning vat location. That's the play line we're going to go with. We're going to lock that in. So they do a Juggernaut into the cloning vats. They do a Killmonger, which was the one play that I said would probably do it for them, which is unfortunate. Had we dropped our Dr. Doom, Juggernaut would have pushed it over here. That would have been 10 power in this lane for a total of 15 power. They won this one by 14, and we tied in the Gila. Our winning play was Dr. Doom into the Doombot, into the Juggernaut, but I just didn't anticipate... I didn't really anticipate a Killmonger in a debris style deck where they're intentionally clogging up our board with 1-cost rocks. Very well played, Sedge. Very well played. Okay, so in our opening hand, we do have Sandman. If we can draw into Psylocke here, we're going to be able to ramp up into Sandman to have some pretty good upside. Unfortunately, we don't draw into Psylocke, but we do draw into Sunspot. So we're going to drop our Sunspot into the cloning vats, and then we may potentially play him again next turn in another lane. That's going to make it pretty easier for us to just pass and get, let's say we pass 5 energy. We're adding 10 power to the board, which is pretty decent value for 5 power. So we're going to go ahead and drop our Sunspot into Titan. We don't necessarily want to take the extra turn to duplicate him again, but we are going to be able to kind of keep our board clear with the Sunspot, the weird Sunspot play here. And then we draw into Leader. So that's going to allow us to duplicate a lot of the cards that they play in the following turns. So I think what we do is we kind of push our board advantage just by passing here. And that's going to give us, and then they use a Mr. Negative. It's awesome. So what we're going to do is we're going to snap the play line that we have. We have Leader here, who is going to be able to duplicate whatever card they play. So if they play a negative version of Devil Dino here, we're going to be able to copy that card into cloning vats, and we get an additional Leader into our hand. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's see what they play this turn. If they have an inversed Iron Man, they dropped an Iron Man into the cloning vats, which is just absolutely phenomenal for us. So now what we can do, them knowing that we have Leader here, do we ever do something like a Dr. Doom and we don't copy their leadered cards? We end up doing something like Arrow to pull them over. I think that's risky, because then if they have like a White Tiger, they could push power into Murder World. So instead, I think we go with Leader into Titan. That'll let our Sunspots buff up by 1. We're going to copy at least 1 card that they drop into cloning vats. And then if they're strategic with it, they'll drop a lesser of the 2, and then they'll drop a large power one there afterwards. And so dropping the Leader here will give us the advantage in Titan. Next up, we have Toda, and we do in our starting hand have Psylocke. Can we finally draw into the dream where we can ramp into our Sandman? Right now, it's looking pretty scarce. It doesn't look like it's going to be a great possibility. We can drop our Psylocke. Next turn, we'll be able to do either Jubilee or Crossbones. And since they didn't play something into Asgard, we're going to be able to drop our Crossbones into Asgard this turn to give ourselves a pretty large advantage here. And then it being turn 3, I think we go ahead and cap out this location. It's 15 power that we push on turn 3 into Asgard. If they want to compete with that, they're going to have to invest some pretty heavy resources. And we know that at the end of the game, we will be able to drop a Kingpin and a Cloak. It's kind of scary. So if they can drop an Arrow. So we have priority here. What if we drop our Jubilee? They're going to pull their Bucky Barnes in with the Kingpin Cloak for a pretty nice combo. They're going to kill their own Bucky Barnes, turn him into Winter Soldier. That's pretty nice. And then if they drop something like an Arrow, so let's say we drop our Arrow. They get an additional 6 power here from Bucky Barnes. That's going to be not enough to win Asgard. We can drop our Arrow, pull their card out. Even if they drop their own Arrow, we're going to pull theirs first because we have priority. Let's go ahead and snap back. I feel pretty confident. They're going to move their Bucky Barnes. Whatever they drop here, we're going to be able to pull before it actions. And I think we have a pretty good chance And so they pull him over, they drop one card. We go ahead and pull their card over. I anticipate it's a move type card, and so it is an arrow. So we had the read correct. But because we were able to action our arrow before theirs, we do get the additional upside. And so for turn 5, in our deck, we still have Magneto and we have Sunspot. So I think we don't gamble here. I don't think we go with the potential upside or the potential flip. I think instead we go with just a claw. That's going to allow us to push additional power into Asgard. It's going to push a little power into Dream Dimension. And then we know that depending on what they drop, we can either copy their card next turn with Leader. We can send a Doombot into the other lanes with Dr. Doom. We could even do something cool with like a Jubilee pull if we pull into our Sunspot. And so I think what we do is we just push additional power that way. And so they are going to have a 4 power, 0 cost card this turn. And we are tied for every lane except for Asgard, which we are currently winning. So I think the best play line for us is going to be our Leader here. It's just a matter of where do we drop our Leader. So if they were to flood one of the locations, they could potentially outpower us. But because they retreated, we're not going to be able to see how that resulted or ended up. But the sneaky arrow play that's what swung the game for us. That is what allowed us to still win. Otherwise, they would have won Asgard. They would have got the additional draw. They would have destroyed whatever card we dropped. But the arrow play, the counter arrow play, was what won and sealed that game for us. And then Leader was going to lock it and bring it home. But of course, they ended up retreating. All right, next up we have Alberto. Alberto, are you a real boy? I guess we'll see. So we're going to pass turn 1. If we draw into the Dream, it's pretty much guaranteed they are not a real boy, because the only time we seem to draw into our Dream is whenever it's against a bot. And so they dropped an Okoye. Excuse me, Alberto. It's so funny how sometimes bots can be so good that I feel like it's impossible to win against, and then other times they drop an Okoye into nowhere. Next up we have Kitsune, and we still don't draw into the combo. It feels so bad. One of these times we're actually going to be able to play Sandman, but out of all of the cards that I try to run in combo, Sandman feels like he is the one that wants to work the least often. Like he is always hiding either at the bottom of the deck or as far away from Psylocke as possible. So we're going to go ahead and pass turn 2 as well. Then we're probably going to drop Lockjaw on 3 and start cycling some of our cards. Oh, okay. And so we're going to go ahead and play Lockjaw into the Mirror Dimension. We don't know for sure what that's going to turn into, but that allows us the flexibility to drop our Claw, which will push power into the now flooded Washington, D.C. And I think that'll be enough to swing that location for us. And so that one drops into flooded air. Oh, boy. So that one drops into a flooded lane as well. So what we can do is we can cycle our Psylocke here. We hope that we draw into like a Dr. Doom, who will push power across the other lanes for us, or flip into something that's pretty high power, and then by the end of the game draw into Dr. Doom, where we can play him into Sewer System and distribute that power across the board. And so we do have Psylocke. He's going to give us an extra mana. We do flip into Dr. Doom, who is going to give us the lead in all 3 lanes. Oh my. All 3 lanes here. We can drop Leader this turn, which is going to copy whatever they play in this lane. Next turn we could do Magneto, and that way we could pull over their Storm and their Wave if we need to, depending on what they drop here. But oh my gosh, I didn't realize that we could still play into this left lane. I thought it was already flooded. But because of the way Mirror Dimension works, is it turns into that location, but it turns into the location that says next turn is the last time cards can be played here. So therefore that 5th turn is going to be that final turn. So luckily we dropped our Leader, which copied their Drax and of course turned it into a 9 power card. Theirs did not copy our 9 power, or it did not trigger that on reveal buff, because we didn't technically play him there. So we got even more upside out of that Drax interaction than we could have ever wanted. And then, of course, they do end up retreating because we just had too much upside in these lockdown lanes. Well, that is about 12 games that we played. And so for a 2-card combo to have in your hand by turn 2, you have almost half of your cards. And you don't have to draw into the whole thing by turn 2. You could drop Psylocke and then draw into that last piece on turn 3. Statistically, we should have hit it. But we still won the largest majority of our games. Out of 12 games, we won 8, even though we didn't hit Sandman on any of them. We didn't hit the only one we hit the high roll and had the combo in hand. The enemy retreated on turn 1. So I am going to go ahead and end the video here. Otherwise, we're just going to have so much footage that I'm going to have to pick and choose, and it becomes hard to decide which games to feature and which ones to not. I think this is a better representation of actual gameplay with this deck, rather than just getting high rolls. So we got a lot of low rolls, but we were still able to win a lot of the games. Because of the way this deck's power works, we're able to push out a lot of power into a lot of different lanes, even if they lock one down with a Professor X, if they lock one down into a flooded location. We just have so much flexibility and disruption tools of our own that it becomes pretty consistent, even though we're not hitting that Sandman lockdown. But even though Sandman did not make an appearance in this deck list, his usage is pretty straightforward. You ramp into him, you drop him on turn 3. That's going to allow you to outpower your opponent on turns 4, 5, and 6. Because your cards are designed to either pull additional cards based on what your opponent plays, move their cards where they don't want them to be, push power into multiple lanes, you have a lot of good usage and utilization for your late game gameplay. I am going to go ahead and end the video here. I hope that you guys enjoyed it, even though Sandman was shy and didn't make an appearance. I hope you enjoyed it anyways. If you did, make sure to leave it a like, leave a comment down below. That way I can know that you guys are enjoying the content, and I can make sure to focus on what you guys are enjoying and what you guys like seeing. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and end it here. This has been TLSG. Later, guys.